So for those of you that don't know, I am a professor part-time, and one of the classes that I teach is all about how to take creative disciplines and apply them to non-gaming, non-animation industries. So 3D models, 2D drawings, etc., visualization, interaction. How does that work for all of these other industries like automotive, medical, retail, etc.? So one of the assignments that I gave to my students was to visualize the interior of a store layout and recommend an improvement in that layout and visualize it and basically pitch it to me as the owner of the store and explain to me why I should change the layout. I have a few students who have expressed concern with kind of how to get started. How do you know where to begin? And if you don't have a ton of time to commit to something, how can you get the most efficient results? So I'm going to dive into that a bit today in Maya. And I'm just going to use Maya. Most of this workflow is comparable to a Blender workflow. I just have been in Maya for 15 years, so I tend to stick with what I know best. So we'll do it in Maya. If I get requests, I'll do this exercise again in Blender. This is going to be pretty ad hoc and off the cuff, so we'll just kind of take it and see how we do. So I created a cube. The first thing I want to do, though, is just look at what exactly I want to emulate. And this is maybe a good example. So I typed in store layout, store design inside of a store, something like that. And you can see there are a lot of different types of stores. So the first thing is if you're a student and you're trying to customize this to something that works for you, pick something that you're interested in. I didn't specify what kind of store I own within this assignment. So if you're into biking, make it a bike store. And then maybe you could model a bicycle and have that be a portfolio piece too. So always kind of bend the rules of the assignments to suit your needs best is generally the recommendation. So I'll just look at something like this and call that good and say that I want to make some shelving. I want some products on it. And let's just say that that's as far as I want to get. Maybe one rotunda, like a round clothing rack or something could be of interest. So if I want to do that, I'm going to start by making the floor. So right now I'm just scaling up to make the cube. I've just clicked create cube here. In Maya and Blender, there is a object add cube function as well if you want to go that route. All right, hitting W to move it, make sure that it's in line with my grid. Then I want to create what is going to be the backdrop of a shelf. And just looking at our reference, most of these shelves are relatively flat with maybe a slight edge on the front for labeling. Some of them are slightly angled down, but for the most part, it's just flat shelves running across with some type of end cap. So let's make the back of this by shrinking the width of the back plate. And then essentially we can go about this two different ways to create end caps. I can either make two new cubes, position them accordingly, and have it all just kind of look good enough. Or I can come in here and do a mesh tools, insert edge loop, and then come over here and just do something that's relatively close. Let me get this so that I'm actually going to be doing something similar on both sides. So for that, I just put in the two different edge loops, and now I'm going to hit F11 to go into select the faces here. Going to hit Control E to extrude and pull those out forward. Now I can hit left click here on the top faces and pull this up. And then what I can do is just create a new plane and, or rather create a new cube. And let's say I want it angled down just slightly because that's the type of product that I want to market. Going to have it stick through the back of this and go through both sides. Go back into the move tool, hit Shift D, which is going to allow me to duplicate but maintain the offset. So now if I hit Shift D again, it's just going to maintain that offset and walk this thing all the way up to the top. So that's one type of shelf. Here is another type of shelf, would probably be the same thing, but we would likely just do F11, grab all these faces, hold down Control to unselect, grab all the bottom faces, pull this down a bit lower, and perhaps do something that is more flat for like the ketchup bottles and stuff that we were just looking at. So for that, I'm going to have a bottom rack. Make sure that this is not poking through the edges. And then Shift D, pull up, and Shift D. And let's go back. I'd rather actually get these closer, I think. And let's pull out that, and let's pull down these top faces. And we're good to go. So there are two different types of shelves. Let's say I'm going to select all of these and Control G to group. Let's say that we want the edge of the store lined with these. I can again use that Shift D tool, pull it over, and Shift D all the way across. This is almost looking akin to a blockbuster. So if you click on a grouped object and then you hit up arrow, it will let you select the entire group. I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate this and turn this 90 degrees up here in my attributes or my channel box. Pull this back towards the edge. And then let's just say there's a doorway or something back there. Now I can Shift D to pull this down, and Shift D and Shift D. Looks like it's going to be a little bit long on this side, so I'm going to grab all of this and pull it over. And then let's say there's a display in the center here. This is a relatively small store for all intents and purposes. Going to group this, pull it all over. I think I can modify freeze transformations, modify center pivot. Now it's a little bit more friendly to work with. And now if I want to do something in the middle here, I can Shift D, pull it over, rotate it to 90, and translate it so that it's right about there, and then hit Shift D again and Shift D again. And that's close enough for something I'm trying to do as a relatively quick visualization. Back into F8 for object mode. And then just from a top-down perspective, is this relatively centered? Sorta. Let's make sure we have it all picked. Except for the ground, that is. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And let's see here. So we've been going for 8 minutes. We're trying to get something done in 15 that looks good enough. We're just going to assume that that's the stock room in the back. And maybe the entrance is right over here. So if I want to assume that there is some type of conveyor belt style checkout here, it's not too bad. Let's drop that into the floor just a bit. It's nice that you don't really have to worry about edge loops and topology when doing really quick renders in Maya. If we were going out to a game engine, we'd want to care a little bit more about this. So I'm going to hit F11, Control E, pull that in just a bit there. And then we're going to Control E again and drop it down just a little bit. So we'll say that's our conveyor belt area. If we want to have a seat or something, no big deal. We can grab a cylinder, put it over here, shrink that down just a bit. And let's see. If I hit 3, it's going to preview a smooth. So I'll just do that. Then I'm going to duplicate, pull this over, shrink this down, hit 1 to go back to unpreview smooth. And basically what I'm going to do is just create a few legs here. Nothing too fancy. In fact, let's just do one leg for the sake of time. And I'm just going to look from over here so that I know that it's roughly in the center of what we just had. I probably could have just not moved it or not translated it, and it would have stayed perfectly centered, but here we are. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And then we probably want some type of table for a cash register. Okay. Drop this so it's going to hit the ground and be roughly the same height as the conveyor belt. We don't care if it goes under the ground for right now, because for the sake of time, it does not matter. We grab a duplication there, pull this down, and make this a keyboard. Let's see, I'll hit F11, grab the top face, scale it down just a little bit. Looks a little bit more keyboard-esque, and then I want to shrink it, pull it over this way. And that's probably good enough. Now, I'm going to grab something like we'll just grab this chair cushion here, pull it over, bring it up, and this will become our mouse. This needs to drop in because that's way too tall for a keyboard. And then we want to do a screen. So I'm just going to shrink this down quite a lot. Widen it out, pull it up here. And then that should be relatively decent after duplicating this pole and bringing it right over here. Pretty okay with that. Pull it over just a bit and angle this just a bit so it looks a bit more natural. Okay, not bad. Last thing I want to do, we're at 12 minutes, is maybe put out a clothing area, right? So if I want to do that, I'll grab a recycling, or a cylinder rather, and pull this all the way over here. And let's see, actually, instead of a cylinder, let's use our little donut here. I'm pretty happy with this. Section radius, let's see how we can make this look a bit better. I think that's it. So we want 0.02 maybe. Let's go 0.05. Okay, that looks like a pretty good clothing rack. And then we want to grab our cylinder from over here. Pull this right over so that it is roughly centered, which I can see over here that it is. I can see from the top that it needs a little bit of centering though. And then let's just say I have don't want to take the time to create a shirt. So let's just say I have some type of garment. If we want to, we could come in here and insert edge loop and do one right here and here, and then hit F11, select these bottom pieces, and just do some shorts. Why not? Perfectly happy with that for the time being. So again, to get it to preview smooth, I've just hit 3. Nothing more fancy than that. And I'm just going to say that it has some type of strange connection to this thing that I don't need to really care about. F11, grab the top, unselect, pull it up so that it's about the same height. F8, duplicate, rotate to 90, just so that we have points that it is touching the top circle here, so we're not floating in midair. Pull it all back down, over just a little bit. That'll be just fine. And then let's do Shift D. Move this over and rotate. And then Shift D. Don't think we rotated enough, so let's do it one more time. Shift D. Let's look at it from the top. We're going to go out here And we're going to move it so the tangent is relatively facing forward. So this red line should be facing forward. Shift D. And just for the sake of timing, instead of messing with that again, we're just going to shrink all of this down. Move it over slightly. Shift this just a little bit. And I'd say that we're good to go. So at this point, we've hit 15 minutes. The last touch I'm going to put on this before I start to get something that I can turn in is select it all, hold down right click, go to assign new material, go into Arnold, do the ambient occlusion shader because a good ambient occlusion always makes things look good. Go into Arnold, go into lights and create one sky dome light. And then the last thing that I want to do is just find a decent camera angle. This one will do. And I want to go to Arnold, render. Let's see what we got. So in the span of 15 minutes, we now have a very good basis for what a store layout could start to look like. I'm putting all of this together not to show you what's perfect or what's going to be what you would want to put in front of a customer or a client, but more so to show you that it's not that scary to get started. So dive in, start doing some of your 3D modeling. If you wanted to put your customer in a headset after this, you could export this out to Unity, and in Unity just throw on some very simple materials and get someone in a headset walking around the environment, and all of a sudden you have a very impactful piece here. The other piece that I would want to start doing is putting some type of item that they're selling out here on the shelves. We could probably do that, and maybe for the sake of making this a 20-minute video, we could dive into it. Why not? Why not? So I'm going to exit out, and let's just say I'm only going to do this for a quick moment because I don't want to totally derail this tutorial. But let's just say we want this to be bottles. So for that, I would come in here and with F11 select the top, unselect the bottom, Control E to bring it up, close it up, Control E to bring it up, come up just a little bit so it creates a good edge loop. And we'll call that good enough. So now if I hit Q to get out of the tool, I'm going to shrink this a bit more because I think that it needs it. And then let's hit 3. And okay, that's a bottle of something. I'm going to shrink it widthwise so that it kind of looks like some dish soap or something comparable. And then let's say I need a stocked shelf. We'll say that all that is sold here is this soap. So if I do Control or Shift D rather, and get all of these out here, now I can grab these 3 and hit Shift D, move them over. Okay. And now let's grab all of these, unselect everything else, Shift D to move them up. Let's make sure that we don't have this selected. Cool. Shift D to move them up, bring them up here, and then Shift D again. And now that's good enough. Because I'm only looking at it from a render from this angle, I'm not going to worry about stocking anything that's facing away from me. So the other piece of this that I could do, let me delete these out since I accidentally selected them. Let's just say it's something circular. So maybe selling who knows what. Snow globes, ornaments. And without making this too arduous to get through, we'll shrink this down and call that a snow globe. So all that I did there was grab a sphere, duplicate it, squish it, pull it over. We're good to go. I'm going to do that there, and then I'm going to grab these and Shift D, slide them over, and we'll call that good. And if I want to grab all these, unselect anything that I don't want, Shift D, pull them up. Okay, that's good enough for now. And let's just say that we want something that is almost like a movie, like a blockbuster or something. What we could do here is, if we had thought to populate all of these initially, is I could have just done it once on one of these copies before duplicating them out, and then these all would have duplicated with, which would have been the smarter play here. But in the nature of trying to show you all things with all the mistakes instead of all nicely edited together, we're just gonna figure it out. Okay, let's go up, Shift D, Shift D. That's good enough. They start to kind of fall into the racks themselves, but it doesn't bother me too much. And then let's just assume that I want to select all of these. Shift D and move them over. I do want to unselect all of the shelves, since that would be a bit of a cluster. And then I'm just going to Control D for the last duplication. And then let us Control D to bring over here. I'm going to make sure I group them so they don't rotate on their local pivot. And let's do a, where are you? Modify center pivot. And we'll call that -90. And now we're going to go and move these all back into the shelf. And over and in. Shift D, pull them down. Shift D, and we're good. Now let's pull us back over to our render. Again, we don't care about what's facing away from us. Let's make sure we have everything in here. Hold down that right click, assign the existing ambient occlusion Arnold material, and then come right back up here and do the Arnold render view. That is not too bad. So now I would start to play around with the actual render quality and settings. If I come into here, I can change some of the diffuse, specular, the AA, etc. And I think we could probably call it there for today. Let's see if there's something else that we want to do. Maybe we turn the preset up to HD 1080 and then do a new render. Looks a bit cleaner. That's pretty damn quick. And now we have a store layout assignment done if this was an assignment, but luckily the beginnings of something that looks a bit more professional for different store layouts. Last thing we'd want to do, just in the nature of cleaning up our own messes, is that these soap bottles did not make it to the top. So we're going to select them, unselect everything else in the environment, just like that. And we're going to duplicate and bring them up after deselecting these last few things. All right, so now with that in mind, I'm going to pull my camera back. And I think this is a pretty successful use of what ended up being 24 minutes. So from beginning to end, 24 minutes, we got something really nice to be proud of. I'm going to exit out of the settings, pull up the Arnold render view, and this is what we're working with right now. I appreciate you all watching. Please ask all the questions that you can. Hopefully this alleviated some amount of anxiety around getting started in Maya and just getting something looking good, and getting some 3D pieces laid out and visualized that you can be happy with. I hope y'all have a great day. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See ya.